All right, welcome back to another tutorial in Maya. Today it's all about volumetric fog or volume fog. And we're going to be working with one spotlight, and we're going to be creating sort of an underwater or a foggy room type of scene using the volumetric, volume primitives right here, volume primitives. And in this case I have a sphere going. And I'm going to show you sort of how to go about using some of these volumes to create, an atmospheric fog in your scene or where you might need it. So it's fairly simple, and we're going to be working with a spotlight and just a plane and a sphere. So we'll keep this really simple. The render times might take a little while. And then we're going to assign some fog, some light fog to our light up there. So this is a tutorial about using the spotlight and light fog and the volume primitives. So let's get started and take a look. Here's what I have in the scene so far, and let's do a zoom out on here, and I'm going to show you this. This is what a volume primitive is. It basically shows up as a sphere, and it has some fog assigned to it. So in order to start with this, you'll notice that it can be scaled, or you can also change its radius right here. If I want to bring it up a little bit, you'll see that that's kind of where you find your radius point for that. So anyway, by default when you create this, it is set up a little differently. So let's go back to the beginning and sort of take a look at how to use a spotlight, create one, and create just some simple geometry and go through this. So in this case, I think what I'll do is I'll just start a new scene, and I don't need to save that. And right away, let's just create a NURBS plane. Pick any NURBS plane you want there. Little joke. And sort of just make a NURBS plane. No big deal. Now let's create a polygon sphere, and we'll just set it in the middle there somewhere. Maybe turn on your shaded mode, and there we go. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit and back that off, and maybe bring it up a little bit more. Okay, now let's create a light, just a simple spotlight, and this is going to be the light of choice. Now let's do this real quick, because this throws people off all the time. Go to your spotlight and go to your options here, and you'll notice that these are just the default settings, and that's exactly what we want. And in this case, I'm going to have interactive placement checked, and with that enabled, I can basically become the spotlight. The spotlight becomes a camera, so you have to be aware of that. And if you don't check that, your spotlight will just show up here on the grid as a normal object. But in this case, I want to have interactive placement checked, and when I hit create, you're going to notice something. All right, it did something really weird. Now we're inside of the camera, or we're inside of the spotlight, and we're going to sort of use our camera tools to sort of move around here and place the light where we kind of want it. So in this case, I'm just going to go for kind of an overhead thing like that. No big deal. Now, in order to get out of this spotlight, we have to basically tell Maya to take us out of that spotlight. So you're going to go to your panels and come over here to your perspective cam. As you can see, the light itself shows up as a shape right now, camera shape 1. And when we switch back to perspective, this will now disappear from this option up here. So we're going to go back to the perspective view. And now we can see we have our spotlight, and here's our sphere. And if I go back to my panels here and look, now I just have my choice of, say, my perspective camera or any camera that I've made. So there you go. Pretty simple. Let's go ahead and enable textures. Let's enable the lights. Let's enable shadows. And if you want, go ahead and go into your high quality rendering there. And there you go. So let's just do a render by default. I'm going to go ahead and just click on my render. And there it is. Nothing too big. Just plain old sphere. So let's bring this up a little bit now. And let's take a look at the light here. Let's maybe bring that up just a little bit. And before we get too far into this, let's sort of just create some materials here, like just say, let's do a Fong. And there's my Fong. So click on your Fong, and let's take that Fong and assign it to our sphere just to give it a little bit of shininess. So go ahead and click on your sphere, right click, go down to existing material and assign it that fog 1. All right. And there it is. Now let's put our fog into the scene now that we have some basic elements. Go ahead and just click anywhere out here. What we're going to do is we're going to create what's known as a volume primitive, and in this case I used a sphere on the last one, so let's use the cube on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and just choose a cube. As you can see, it shows up down here, and we'll give it a size. Right now it's sized at 2 units basically, so let's just upsize that to say like 20 units in all directions. So we'll do 20 there, put 20 in there, and 20 in there, and you can see it grows. So now we have some volume fog. Well, let's sort of zoom in here and do a quick render. I'll go ahead and hit my render button, and as you can see, nothing shows up. And you might say, hey, where's my fog? I thought I assigned it some fog. Well, here's what it does is it creates a shape, and then it assigns it a cube fog. And this is an inherent material inside this volume cube, but it's not going to do anything yet until we actually assign it some fog. It's ready to accept the fog, but it's not really ready to do anything for us yet. So let's take that aside and come into your hypershade. And over here in your hypershade, just simple Maya. Let's go to the simple Maya volumetric materials, and this is where we'll find some various volume materials, and what we're interested in is just that fog. So we want to click on our fog here, and that'll give you what's known as a volume fog. Now this volume fog needs to be assigned to the cube right here. So I'll go ahead and select my cube and then maybe right click, come down to assign existing material, and in this case we're going to assign it that volume fog. And I'll zoom in here a little bit more, and let's take another render. As you can see, it is showing up. I can see the plane here, I can see the fog here, but it's not really what we want. We really want to fine-tune this fairly quickly. So in order to do that, I find that it's easiest to sort of come into your hypershade and look at where your nodes are here. And in this case, I have a number of them. The volume fog is right here, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on my volume fog, and notice that I have my volume fog tab with some attributes I can mess around with here. Okay, well that's cool. Let's first start with say a density and transparency. Let's move our hypershade out of the way here. Let's move our render view back in, and in this case I'm in Maya software. Okay, so make sure you're rendering in Maya software, and I have this just set to the software. I have Maya software set to basically the production quality, so that ought to get us by. And these are, you can do this in Mental Ray as well. It's a little different, but right now we're just going to be doing the Maya volume primitive fog method. So there you go, easy. So let's look at the transparency first and sort of bring that transparency level up quite a bit. You'll see it adjust in your sample up here, and we'll go ahead and take another render. And now you can see where you're starting to get something. The spotlight's doing what it does. It just shines down in there, and it assigns it just a basic white color at the moment. So by moving this transparency level around a little bit, you'll probably get a lot more realistic look. And the transparency a little goes a long way, so just go ahead and sort of adjust it toward the end spectrum there, and I might want just a little bit more on there. So that's your first thing to look at, so to speak. And then you also have density to deal with, this fog density. So that's what I usually like to adjust second. I'll maybe bring it up a little bit. And a little bit of density goes a long way as well. So you'll notice that if you bring your density way up, then you'll have something like that, but not quite what we want. So we're just going for a basic subtle underwater effect or a foggy room effect, like a just sort of like some atmospheric fog. And there we go. So those are two things to play around with at first. You can mess around with your intensity levels. Those will also make a difference. And let's see, you can mess around with your color. If I want to change this color, come over here and just go ahead and click in your color swatch and maybe make it something more like an oceany kind of color like that. And you'll notice that it sort of does what it will. Now I'm going to go ahead and do a zoom out here, and we'll take a look at the whole thing and bring that render in. As you can see, it sort of has the shape of that, it has the shape of the volume shape of a cube, basically. And that's what it is. So anyway, the selected color, this is just sort of a color ramp that blends all the colors together for the fog. And if you notice, let's bring over our render view here, maybe zoom in a little bit more here, and let's change this to, say, transparency. I'll go ahead and do a quick render, and you'll notice that it starts to look a little weird. This basically just sets the ramp in different positions, and most of the time you're only going to be using it, or you're not going to be using it outside of just leaving it off. So let's see if I can. I'm going to zoom out here a little more, do a render. Yeah. So anyway, I would usually just leave it on ignore. So there you go. Just some options to play with there. Now let's take a look at the spotlight up here real quick. You'll notice that it's casting shadows down here. Let's sort of open that up through our, I'm going to go in my lights in my hypershade and go into the lights section and choose that light. So here's my spotlight shape 1, and you'll notice that it has some various things I'm working with here, and it by default is just set at 1. I'll leave it there, but remember, you can mess around with your cone angle to give it kind of a wider spread, bring it back in. The penumbra will soften up the edges. Let's sort of look at how that works. We'll do a quick render with it like this, and as you notice, that is a pretty wide angle there. I'm going to come in here a little bit more to the side and see if we can sort of set this up more like what it would be like in a room. There we go. Maybe this is like a stage of some sort, and you can see kind of where that's the box, the volume of the fog. So anyway, let's work on softening up this edge. That's what's known as the penumbra angle, and if you increase that a bit, let's just sort of give that a bit of an increase there. I'm going to go ahead and do another render, and you'll notice that it softens up that edge quite a bit. And in this case, its intensity, we could bring the intensity up a little bit, do another render, and there we go. So that's sort of it there. The spotlight is going to have either depth map shadows, or you can use ray trace shadows. In this case, it's best to probably just use depth map shadows. Leave your resolution at 512. Remember that if you bring this up too fast, sometimes it can cause Maya to crash. So your resolution is probably good at 512. If you want to soften up the edge of your shadow down here, you can always move your filter size up a little bit, and that's going to increase your render times, of course, and especially when you get more stuff going on here. But you can play around with that. That's sort of the limitation of what this method's all about. And remember, you can mess around with your shadow color that is coming off of the light. Right now it's set down to a black, but if I change that shadow color up a little bit, it should appear a little more transparent for me. So there you go. Now those are the things you can kind of play with the spotlight. Drop off, I kind of like to use drop off a little bit, and when you use drop off, it's best to bring your intensity up, and we'll sort of take a look at it, what it's like there. Now another option is to actually put some decay on there so it naturally decays from its brightest point to the darkest. But when you do that, your intensity usually drops quite a bit. So what you need to do is increase your intensity level over here, and then it'll start having a little bit more of effect. In this case, I might want to go to an intensity level of, say, 15, and let's do a quick render and see what we got. All right, so that's sort of where we're at now. Let's take a look at adding some light fog to this spotlight, because this is really cool and will help you build some cool effects into your fog. If you come over into your spotlight, look at your fog effects or light effects right here, and we'll go ahead and look at light fog and just click on that checkerboard box. Right away it assigns a light fog, and if I move back here a little bit, you'll see an extension coming out of the spotlight now. And if I move this density, I could probably say put a density of 2 on there at the moment, and we'll just leave the default color at white. And let's choose that this light right here. We'll actually choose the spotlight shape 1, and let's actually go to scale and bring this scale out so that it now penetrates that ground plane. And this is the angle of our fog. If I do a quick render from this view, you'll notice that it now has some light in there that's shining into the fog itself. So it's a double fog on fog kind of thing. All right, so I think in this case I'm going to bring let's look at our light fog here, and in your tabs up here you want to go to light fog 1 and maybe bring that density back down to 1. 100, not 1. There we go. And let's see what that does. We'll do a quick render. Alright, so it's a little less intense, and you kind of get the idea. You'll notice that it adds a lot of time to your renders as you start using light fog, so be aware of that. If you come over into your volume fog color over here, remember you can vary the color. If you come into your spotlight, we could actually take that spotlight and give it a different type of color. We might want to make it more of a blue. So go ahead and play around with your colors. And it's sort of all just an experimental thing where you'll get used to making all sorts of adjustments on a basic level like that. And yeah, so you can kind of tell what it's doing. That's essentially how you work with these volume primitives. And a spotlight just is a spotlight. It does exactly what it does. And you know, rendering, play around with your shadows, your shadow color. You can assign different colors to your shadow down here. Yeah, whole world of possibilities. But it's about the concept, and this is sort of a simple way to do it. It's not necessarily the way to do it, but sometimes you just need a simple volume fog effect for one reason or another. So there it is. And it will, once you start adding fog, you'll notice your render times will increase greatly. All right, so there you go. All right, well, I hope you learned something, and you know, wise up, read a book, be a great person. All right, thanks for watching.